Good evening and welcome to Sweet Thursday. We are on Zoom webinar format, and unlike Zoom meeting, we cannot see or hear any of you. The chat and raise hand functions are disabled, but Q&A will be open for you to type your questions for our author. This talk is being recorded, and you can view it on the YouTube channel at the URL link at the bottom of this slide. Sweet Thursday is the author series hosted by the Friends of the Lafayette Library. My name is Jeff Deeden, and I'm the coordinator of the program and tonight's moderator. This afternoon, we have swimmer, author, and journalist Bonnie Tsui to explain some of the history and benefits of swimming. We will continue bringing you virtual presentations of Sweet Thursday and WOW until it is safe again to gather in person in the Don Tatson Community Hall at the Lafayette Library and Learning Center. We are exploring the possibility for the fall, but much uncertainty persists about the pandemic, and we are not scheduling any in-person events at this time. On April 29th, Dr. Robert Pearl, who appeared with his book Mistreated as my first author when I assumed this role 3.5 years ago, will return to discuss his new book, Uncaring: How the Culture of Medicine Kills Doctors and Patients. On May 20th, Dr. Linda Hsu of the Kaiser Thrive Kitchen will bring us recipes from her new cookbook, Spicebox Kitchen. On June 10th, Carrie Gillum covers the inside story of the school groundskeeper who took on Monsanto in the Monsanto Papers. And on June 24th, best-selling author Lisa C. will discuss her newest book, The Island of Sea Women. Upcoming WOW presentations include art educator Avril Angevine, who will discuss the photography of Dorothea Lange on April 14th. And on May 12th, a docent from the De Young will share insights into their Calder Picasso exhibition. In order to learn more about all of our programming, you can sign up for the weekly ad lib emails, which describe upcoming events. You can do this on the library website, lllcf.org. On April 26th, the Lafayette Library will reopen with limited capacity to offer select services with a time limit of 1 hour. Masks, social distancing, and other safety measures will be in place, and stay tuned for other details. You can learn about even more programs at other county libraries and the county website, which is ccclib.org. In pre-COVID times, the Friends Corner Bookshop sales supported a number of programs and services at the library. These include librarian salaries for Sunday hours, books and other materials, library programs, Friends programs such as this and WOW, and support the Library Foundation and Historical Society. The bookshop remains open for curbside pickup, and you can call them to ask for specific books, and the Amazon store is open and available on the Friends website. And we are still unable to accept book donations, but hopefully that'll change soon. For their support, I would like to thank the Friends of the Lafayette Library, the library staff, the foundation, and my Sweet Thursday committee members. You can buy Bonnie's book at Orinda Books, so you can go to their website or call them to order it. Oops. Let me get back on sharing. Okay, tonight I'm pleased to welcome Bonnie Tsui to the Lafayette Library and Learning Center. Bonnie was born in Queens and raised on Long Island, New York. Her parents met in a swimming pool in Hong Kong, and both Bonnie and her brother swam competitively. She graduated from Harvard with a degree in English and American Literature and Language, where she also rowed crew. Her 2009 book, American Chinatown, A People's History of Five Neighborhoods, won multiple awards. She is a longtime contributor to the New York Times and has performed numerous times on Pop-Up Magazine and other live storytelling events. Bonnie lives, swims, and surfs in the Bay Area and is a member of the San Francisco Writers Grotto. Why We Swim has received praise from the New York Times, San Francisco Chronicle, LA Times, NPR, and more, and is one of Time Magazine's 100 must-read books of 2020. The paperback version debuted this month. Her first children's book, Sarah and the Big Wave, will be published next month. So it's now time to meet her. So let me stop sharing. And Bonnie, if you would turn on your audio and video, we can get started. Welcome to the library.
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here with you tonight. Thank you, Jeff, for that lovely introduction. I am very touched. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, welcome. I have a whole bunch of questions, and hopefully our audience will as well. Let me get started by saying that I enjoyed your book a lot on multiple levels because it covers so many topics, all of them touching on swimming. I found it a little difficult to categorize. It could be philosophy or wellness or sports. But my personal takeaway is that swimming is a great way to find balance in life. And it's all laid out with nice stories of individuals to highlight your points and your sections. Now you're an avid and longtime swimmer, but what made you decide to write a book about swimming?
You know, when you write a book, when you decide to write a book, I think that the most important question you need to ask yourself is, are you willing to spend upwards of 2 to 3 years of your life not only thinking about and writing the book, but also after the book comes out, talking about it, promoting it, and really communing with, I think, which is the best part, which is afterwards communing with the audience, right? So I remember with American Chinatown, and that book was something that I just, it was about my family's personal history with Chinatowns in the United States, and they came through both New York and San Francisco Chinatown, and it was about my examination of that personal story, but also these different generations in each of these 5 Chinatowns I examined. And it was this funny thing that happened after that, which was, it was my first really big book, and every year when it's around Chinese New Year, my husband goes, it's the gift that keeps on giving, in that people keep, will say, well, do you have something to say about Chinese New Year? Or do you have something to say about the Asian diaspora, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember thinking that the next book is going to be something that I'm going to want to talk about for many, many years after. And of course, swimming was one of the few things that I thought of that, again, because my parents, it's just something that's been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I remember going to Jones Beach in New York and spending all the time with my parents in the water, and then taking swim lessons and joining swim team, and then this life that unspooled with lifeguarding and teaching swim lessons myself, and joining various teams and open water swims and all of that. And the role of swimming has changed in my life. And I know that it's so important to other people as well. And I thought this is just a really interesting and huge topic, obviously, to interrogate why we as a species value swimming on all these different levels. And I found it so interesting because of this very basic fact that anchors it all, which is that we humans are not capable of swimming from birth. We are one of the very few terrestrial mammals that is true for. We have to be taught, and with higher order primates, that's true as well. So scientists have studied chimpanzees and orangutans, and how you can teach them how to swim. They don't know how to swim. In fact, a lot of zoo enclosures around orangutans and chimps are like, there's a moat surrounding them, and they have always been that way for many years, because the assumption was that they couldn't swim, or they were afraid of the water. And so then there were these experiments that were done where scientists gave swimming lessons to these animals and observed all of these really interesting behaviors that were very much telling of our human species. And I just found that so fascinating, because the history of human swimming, of course, is one that goes back many tens of thousands of years. And yet we only have, like, the first piece of evidence only dates back as far back as 10,000 years. So I think that was always, to me, that was interesting to kind of figure out, what are the ways in, what are these interesting sideways angles that I can take in to tell the story of us humans' weird relationship with water and with swimming. And 5 different ways we can answer the question of why we swim.
Yeah, I just found it to be an imaginative, interesting way to write a book about swimming, is to approach it that way, with why. And it was just a cool way it flows. And you have 5 basic sections. And I'll talk about those in a minute, but those are the answer to the title of the book, Why We Swim. The first one, I really love the way you organized it, because you talk about this big event, then that involves the character that underlines your first topic, survival. Then you talk about some historical and personal experiences, and then you go and you describe how you came to meet this person. So why don't you tell us about Guðlaugur Friðþórsson, or however it's pronounced.
So absolutely,
a man from Iceland.
Yes. So Guðlaugur Friðþórsson is the Icelandic fisherman whose story opens the book. And once I kind of relate to you a little bit about it, you'll understand why I wanted to do that. And it's a story that my husband told me one night over dinner. And he works in fisheries and oceans and environment. And so I think an Icelandic colleague had told him the story of Guðlaugur Friðþórsson, which is in 1984, he became this Icelandic national hero when his fishing vessel capsized off the coast of Iceland. And there's a small island off the main island of Iceland called Heimei. And it's, he's from a tiny town in this tiny island in this tiny country of only about now 330,000 people. And Iceland has always been a fishing country, and so many lives lost at sea. And so when you are, that's sort of the backdrop. And a lot of people, learn how to swim from a young age. It's mandatory. And so in 1984, his fishing vessel capsized, and he ended up swimming 6 hours in 41-degree water, in air temperatures much colder than that in the dead of winter. 6 hours, 6 kilometers, 41-degree water. And to contextualize that, the rest of us normal humans would be dead in less than 30 minutes. I mean, it is bitter cold. You cannot keep your core body temperature stable, and everyone else died. And so he swam and swam and swam. He saw the lighthouse on his home island and kept swimming for it. And when he climbed out and climbed across this lava field and got to the first house that he saw with lights on, he got to the hospital. And the thing is, he had no signs of hypothermia, had just was a little bit dehydrated. They couldn't quite discern his body temperature with the thermometer they used, but he was completely fine. And they later determined through these studies that he agreed to undergo that his body fat was more like seal. So it was like 2 to 3 times normal human thickness, more solid. So to me, this story is amazing because it's like this confluence of not just this biological quirk that saved him. He is like the human seal. He's the Selkie of mythology, of Icelandic Scottish lore. He's like this half man, half marine mammal who we think like this is why he survived. We love these survival stories. And also his, him growing up in Iceland, where so many people over the years have died in swimming, fishing accidents, drowning, sometimes just right offshore, that swimming has become part of the public education system. And so when I went to Iceland to participate in the swim that's done in his honor every year, I went to this pool in his small town, and you watch the cycle of people come through, and it's like every small town in Iceland has got a pool that is frequented by the entire community. It's like from kids, like elementary school kids in the mornings taking some lessons. They walk from the public, the elementary school, and they take some lessons for gym class, and they go back to, morning swimmers before they go to work, and then the lunchtime swimmers, and then after work, after school, like people hang out there. And what was so wonderful to me is that someone explained it to me, this historian in Iceland explained it to me as, here in Iceland, it's dark, like in the dead of winter, it gets dark so early, but all of these pools are heated and they're outside and people just go, and the pool is our pub. That, like, to me, that is the most beautiful thought. I wish we had pools as pubs, year round across our country the way that they do, because it is part of their culture to know how to swim. And so Gudlugur became this national hero, and then also internationally, like, the Johnny Carson called and said, like, please come and appear on my show. And he was really open about what happened to him, because his friends, they were holding onto the keel of the boat before everyone else died, and said, like, normally no one knows what happens when there's a fishing accident. And in this case, because everyone dies, and in this case, the safety raft, the life raft, they couldn't get it to deploy. The mechanism was stuck under the water. And so the whole idea of these self-deploying life rafts that were actually going to be installed on this boat, they just ended up not being able to do it before this particular fishing session that they had. And that's why they all died. Like, if the raft had deployed immediately, then most of the sailors would have lived, because they would have all been able to get in. And so they were holding onto the keel of the boat as it was sinking, and they said, if one of us makes it, we have to tell. And so he took this responsibility so seriously. He said, I will tell. And so this swim that I was talking about, that's done in his honor every year in Iceland, it was started because it was about, like, it was done at the navigation school. This beautiful logbook is the handwriting of Gudlugur's father, like from the early years. Like, he would write down the names of the people who swam in honor of those who died, and of Loye is his nickname. And because he was able to do this thing, and it was like, the symbol of Icelandic resilience and perseverance, and just this honoring of this life by the sea. And I just thought, that is the story I want to tell to open the book. And that's why I chose it.
And it's you know, beautiful also that it's not just his event, but they memorialize all the other four, I think it was, sailors that were lost at sea. That's a nice combination. I think you mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, that doesn't Iceland have the highest per capita rate of swimming pools in the world?
Yeah, I believe I believe that is what is said. I don't know what the final tallies are, but it's supposedly Iceland has the most swimming pools per capita of any country in the world. And if they're not number one, they're very close. Well, first of all, it's a very small country and there's a lot of swimming pools. So it kind of works out in their favor in the math.
And are all those pools heated by geothermal energy?
Most of them are, or many of them are. So, so for example, in Iceland being a volcanically formed chain of islands, there is a lot of geothermal activity. Actually, there's been some active volcanoes in the last couple of months. Actually, he had written to me and shown me a photo of like the view from his daughter's house where there's like the exploding volcano in the background. So he's a person who's witnessed all of these volcanic explosions, I think, in his life. And so that pool, this is the most fascinating, I love this fact. He had, when we were first started to be pen pals, he sent me these photos of this pool that he had grown up taking swimming lessons at. And then there was a volcanic eruption. I think it was in the 70s, and the lava flow ran through town and buried the swimming pool. And there is a picture of the lava flow going through town and covering the pool. And then this new pool, the new pool meaning the pool that I went to, that was built afterwards, was for I think 10 or 15 years heated geothermally by the activity that was still going on after this volcanic explosion. And then I think after 10 to 15 years, they had to then supplement with some other means of heating it. But it's just so crazy to me to see the visual evidence of, the kids are learning with kickboards and there's an instructor. And then the next photo he sends me is this like lava flow through town, like burying the pool. Like it just blew my mind, and all of these like confluence of like wonderful details. And then the detail that sticks with me also is that, so after that particular eruption that was in his childhood, it resulted in the island growing by about 20%, but these like 100-foot lava cliffs, like these being formed that were really steep. And so when he was swimming to the island to safety, where he first hit land was at the base of one of these 100-foot cliffs, and he could not get out. Yeah. He could not climb out. And so he had to get back in the water and swim around to a place where that he could climb out of the water. And I just thought, this man is like the hardiest of all of us, like just mentally brutal. Like, I think that if I hit shore and I had to go back in after that ordeal, I just like, take me away. Yeah, but I'm not that person. But I love that he's like just a very matter of fact. He's got this wicked sense of humor. He's such a funny guy. But that he talked about, he just wanted to keep going, and I think all of us want to know, what is it like to do that, to be sort of forced to face that mortality, like so up close, I guess.
Yeah, well, we have so much more to cover, but we could talk a lot about that. Now, you did the swim though, right? You did the annual swim.
It's long. Cool. It's really long, and we did it in the pool, obviously, in the dead of winter. But it's 6 kilometers, and people show up really like 4 a.m. to do it, so they could do it before they go to work. And I remember watching the light shift, across the windows that were coming. And then my favorite part of that is that, like, I finished and then I texted him and he said, "Oh, you should go and take a rest. It's it's really tiring to swim that far. And I thought, this is so great that he's telling me that I should take a rest after swimming this swim in his honor. Like there was just this, again, like many layered experience that I found just really wonderful.
Very cool to be able to do that. And you mentioned the pools and the pub and all that and the community. We'll get to some different aspects of pools in the US and community in a minute. But right now I want to talk about well-being section, which is your second one. And as I reflected on the book, I thought, really the whole thing is really well-being. It's obviously you needed to be specific, but you can't be well if you're dead and not surviving. Community and competition and flow all offer a definite sense of well-being. And you throw in religion, fighting, strength of mind and body, and other things about how swimming affects the human psyche. So maybe it's not how you would choose to describe your book, but I will. In many chapters, your characters are choosing reasons to swim that I think are as spiritual as they are, gaining the physical benefits of swimming. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to separate out the answers, right? So why we swim, 5 different ways of answering that question. Survival, of course, first and foremost, then well-being, meaning health and wellness, and rehabilitating yourself, and then community, competition, and flow. All of those things are flowing together, braided together. And I do think that anyone you ask who, and certainly the people I spoke to for the book, who of course includes some of the most accomplished and record-breaking swimmers of all time, that they do all speak of swimming as a spiritual practice, meaning that it feeds their mental and emotional states as well as challenging themselves physically. Absolutely. Like it is something that they feel driven to do. Sometimes it's to, how they choose to talk about their motivation obviously varies, right? It just depends on how they choose to think about it. But there is a commonality when you've done enough of these interviews and conversations, that it is about confronting this porousness between states, is how I talk about it in the book, where it's swimming is really interesting because we go into water and the difference between swimming and drowning, floating and sinking, life and death is quite small, in many cases. And you register that when you're learning to swim. You understand that because you feel fear. And that's healthy. That's really, especially in open water, there are so many things that if you're not attentive to them and alert to them, that you can really get into trouble and die. And that's like, I think that primal, essential, basic fact about swimming. And I'm not talking about, the pool that you go to, the community pool that's like,
right,
always 79 degrees and is like perfectly,
no sharks, no riptide.
Exactly. Well, and it's funny that you mentioned sharks, because I am not a person who has ever really worried too much about sharks. I understand that they're out there. I mean, that's just their living room. And so we talk about that. I talk about that quite a bit in the book, actually, with different swimmers who have confronted marine life in open water. And I happen to be, I talked to you earlier, Jeff, this week about this. I happened to be in Florida this week. And Florida, of course, is quite sharky. And I just have not been well, where I swim and surf in San Francisco Bay is, of course, also like sharky, right? So there's the great white feeding zone and the Farallones and where they congregate every year and all that. I know all of these things. And there's drone footage of sharks, juveniles, all along the California coast, coming closer to shore. And I know all of these things. And I just wrote a story about that, about someone who confronts that. And I have been thinking about it a lot too, about how I surf regularly and swim in the open water. But it's just not something that, like, risk-wise, I think about that much. Okay, today, I'll tell you, so in this part of Florida, we're visiting my father-in-law, and at this time of year, there are a lot of blacktip reef sharks that are congregating here, again, feeding, kind of like the great whites come to the Farallones and, sort of November, December, January, February to feed. And they are passing through here. And I was just paddling out my surfboard. It was a relatively flat day, so I was just paddling up and down the coast. And not one, but two sets of fishermen said to me, there's a lot of sharks out there. And we had seen like fish swarming, and it's a different thing when you abstractly are like, I understand that sharks live in the ocean, and that's where they exist. That's their living room. And when I choose to go in the water, I assume that risk. There's a difference between that sort of like intellectual understanding of it, and then being told in real time that, by a boat of fishermen, that they're like, there's a lot of big sharks swimming around us right here. You might want to, exit.
Did they know they were reef sharks, or were they just not sure because they're not man eaters?
Well, they're not man eaters, but they will give you a nasty bite. So I think many of the bites, the encounters, I don't want to call them attacks, because they don't
Right.
want to bite humans. They're just sort of like incidentally, if you're in the water.
Except bull sharks.
Yeah, bull sharks and and the blacktip reef sharks. There was a few weeks ago, there was a 20-year-old kid at the pier here, and he was just wading in the water waist deep, and he got bit. Nasty bite on his arm. He was fine, but it's like a really, like, it's, he will bear those scars for the rest of his life. And I'm just saying that I understand in a very visceral level of discomfort that I have not ever encountered before today.
Interesting.
Yeah. So yeah. I'm still processing. I will report back. But again, like, assuming it's just part of this whole thing that you assume a level of risk when you go out there. And so many people in the pandemic, of course, were seeking that escape and went, out to the waters near them and braved that, and were like adventurous enough to do that. And I got all these great letters, and I was so excited that happened, because they did something that they never thought that they would do before in this time. And I find that so meaningful, Sharks aside.
Tell us what a collection of sharks is called.
A shiver. It's so perfect.
It is perfect. Yeah. I hadn't known that before I read this. In keeping with the well-being section, next you feature Kim Chambers.
Yes.
An amazing person. Tell us how you met her and how she started swimming, which is a great story, the Ocean's 7, and maybe some of her other accomplishments.
Sure. So Kim Chambers I was introduced to her by a mutual friend, and she was the first woman to swim from the Farallones to San Francisco. So aforementioned islands of 30 miles off the coast of San Francisco, open ocean, through Shark's living room to San Francisco. Very cold water. She started in the dead of night. I think it took her about 12 hours. But again, one of these details that I remember so acutely from these stories that I love is like the night before she did the swim, she folded all of her laundry really nicely in her apartment because she said, you know, if I don't come back, I don't want people to think I was a slob. So she's so hilarious. She's a New Zealander, so she says this all in this like really musical laugh. Anyway, so she was the first woman to do that, and she has also broken other records. But the funny thing about that is that she did this incredible feat not that long after almost losing her leg to amputation after this freak accident she had where she fell down the stairs of her apartment, and she almost lost her leg after doing that because of the sort of blunt force trauma to her leg caused this
Compartment syndrome, yeah.
Yeah, the compartment syndrome, which basically means that the swelling gets so extreme that you lose blood flow, and then you will have to amputate if you don't get medical attention immediately to relieve that pressure. So she was like 30 minutes away from amputation, I suppose, is the estimate that her doctors told her when she got rushed to the hospital. And because her pain tolerance is so high, she was an athlete for a ballet dancer, and she thought, oh, I just as a bruise, I'm going to drive to work. She drives to work, she gets to work, and then she collapses at work, and then they rush her to the hospital. And so she then spent the next 2 years of her life rehabbing her leg and relearning how to walk. And in that time, she started to swim because she remembered being a kid at her grandparents' farm in New Zealand and going to the shore and swimming and feeling free. And so she started to swim. And then these guys she met at the pool invited her to swim in San Francisco Bay with the Dolphin Club. And she said, whoever swims out there, I never heard of that. And then she loved it. She felt reborn. And she talked about it as, I mean, it really was kind of a baptism. And she talks about how not many people have video of the moment that they were born. And she said the friends that she had made fast friends with, they got into the water at Aquatic Park, and she just got in, and it was cold, but she felt alive and amazing. And her leg was just, the nerve endings felt better. And she's laughing, and she's just this like skinny, she described herself as a skinny, broken woman. And she said, that was the day that I was reborn. And she basically rehabbed her life through swimming and became this she's a freakishly gifted open water long distance swimmer. I mean, she did not really swim before at all. And in fact, she had terrible technique and had to really learn from fellow swimmers who were super generous, coaches, and then ended up, completing this incredible feat of swimming from the Farallones to San Francisco, and swam relays and swam in the Dead Sea to promote peace, and across the border from Ensenada to not Ensenada, San Diego to Tijuana to promote an understanding between the US and Mexico over like border deaths. And so she's really like wanted to make these swims bigger than herself over time. And she's just this really not only incredible athlete, but an incredible human who kind of chose, again, she anchors the well-being section because she's this person who was saved by swimming and then wanted to use that super power to make the world better for other people. I just really find that so inspiring.
And the first woman to complete the Ocean 7.
Yeah, she was the sixth person, ever to do it.
So,
and also the crazy thing is, like, so many people have, I mean, after she did it, it took a long time for others to follow. And then I think actually the person who did after her is number 7 was this Mexican swimmer named Antonio Arguelles, and he was the one who swam with her to Tijuana. And he was like in his 50s when he did that. And then everyone said, if he can do it, I can do it. Because he had 2 Guinness World Records for that, being the oldest person at the time to do it. And then the oldest man. And then he had some other swimmers beating him. So there was a female swimmer who ended up taking the oldest crown away from him, but he's still the oldest man to do the Ocean 7. But he's actually preparing to break another world record this summer, to be the oldest swimmer to do a double English Channel. So he's training for that right now. So there's amazing feats happening around us.
So for those who don't know what the Ocean 7 is, there are the 7 summits of mountaineering, which are each continent, the highest peak. Tell us what the 7 swims are in the Ocean 7.
The 7 swims are, I
or
want to
just
make sure
a few of them.
Get all of these right. So the Catalina Channel, so close to home, the English Channel, the North Channel between England and Scotland, the
Molokai
Strait, the Sugru Channel between the North and South Islands of sorry. That's the Sugru Strait is between, I think, Hokkaido, right? And the island south of it. And then the channel between the North and South Islands of New Zealand.
Isn't there one, is it the Dead Sea?
It's not the Dead Sea. Hang on.
It doesn't matter. But the point is these are all really long open ocean swims that are crazy.
They're really crazy. And you can really, they're just nuts. The Strait of Gibraltar. That was the last one.
And you described also briefly in a beautiful passage where she went home when her grandfather was ill to swim the Cook Strait for him. And then that's a sharky place too. And she got accompanied by some friends.
Some dolphin friends,
a pot of dolphins swimming with her. I don't know if it was intentional or just inadvertent, but they're protecting her as that happens.
Yeah.
That's got to be, I've on a few occasions been accompanied by dolphins scuba diving, but it's a rare event. It's magical.
They want to play. They're so attentive to you, like humans. They really are incredible creatures. Yeah.
Okay. How about a few personal things? You swam from Alcatraz to Aquatic Park.
I swam from Alcatraz. That was a fun one.
Other than wanting to emulate Jack LaLanne, who did it a little differently, I'm sure that had nothing to do with it. What was your motivation to do that?
At that point, I had never done something like that. I had done triathlons. I had swum on swim teams and raced competitively for many years, but swimming a distance like that from a landmark to another place, and that was known for having crazy currents, being cold, sharks, that it was a prison that no one ever really successfully escaped from, was fun to ponder. And I honestly, I wouldn't have done it if my friend Steve, who's an avid diver, actually, he had been doing some open water swims, and he said, you should totally do it with me. I mean, if I can do it, you can do it. And it was so cool. I mean, I just remember, but I had never really swum in cold water before that. Like, I really was a very tender pool swimmer by that point, at that point in time. And so then I learned to breathe through the shock of cold water. And when I did that swim, I swam with a wetsuit because I was not yet, but one of the swimmers in our group, there were 6 of us swimmers doing it that day. And the swimmers in our group was a dolphin club member who never swam in a wetsuit. She just swam wearing a, just a one piece. And it was freezing. Like even in my wetsuit, I remember jumping in, and I was prepared. We'd done all the training swims. I remember we jumped in at Alcatraz, and I remember feel like this, the involuntary gasp of when you plunge into cold water, which is why a lot of people actually drown when they hit cold water, is that they take in that air, and if they happen to be underwater, they're going to suck down water.
Aspirate. Yeah.
Yeah. So even so, I remember that, being prepared for it. And it was, but the view was incredible, like to be underneath the Golden Gate Bridge and to just see the container ships like plowing by and the wake, and just, it was amazing. I recommend it to anyone who wants to do it, but train for it, have a pilot boat, it's great.
No.
Come on, Jeff.
I've done some wimpy triathlons, but not in that situation. Let's switch to a different part of the book. Competition. I'm going to pick up two completely unrelated things that you mentioned. One is you said you didn't really like competition all that much, and that it unnerves you. And then the section really features Dana Torres and her Olympic exploits and longevity. So in whatever order you want, can you talk about
competition? Sure.
Those unrelated.
I mean, I was a kid who I did love competing. I got that nervous energy coming up to the blocks and doing the events, and I loved the relays. But I mean, that's a totally different thing from when you're an adult. Like, why would you subject yourself to that stress? I mean, some people do, obviously, for competition, but I found that I am a competitive person, but I just didn't need that with swimming over time. Like, I just kind of I got myself out of that coaching mentality and enjoyed swimming for itself, like just feeling good in the water. And so when I was writing this book, and I thought, okay, I need to talk to someone who's like completely driven by competition and wanting to beat someone. And I said, okay, I have to talk to Dara Torres, because she's been to 5 Olympics non-consecutively. Like, she skipped one. She started, I think, as like a 14-year-old kid, and then
she skipped 2.
She skipped 2, right? Yeah. Like in one lifetime.
From teenager to 41.
Yeah, so she made all of these Olympics. She won all these medals, and she retired and unretired. Let's see, she retired 1, 2, 3 times. And her last games was Beijing, I think it was. 16. And she was 41, and she had the fastest seed time going into the final of the 50-meter freestyle. I mean, that is nuts. Like, she's 41 years old. There are other competitors who are 16, and right. She had the fastest time, so she's in lane 4. And I wanted to ask her, so she ended up losing that by 1/100th of a second. And I wanted to ask her what that was like for someone who was so competitive, to also have gotten like to the pinnacle of her fitness and achievement, individual event, fastest event in swimming, the splash and dash, and to have like retired and unretired so many times and still come back to that. I mean, she talked about how she was pregnant and she would be swimming, and then she would start racing like the guy in the lane next to her, because she couldn't stand having this dude beat her. Like, she would just, and even though she was feeling so nauseous, that she would just be like, I'm going to beat this guy, I don't care. And that she would feel so terrible, but still do it. And so she talked about how when she was a kid, she's one of several kids, and how they would like race to the car or race to call their mom on Mother's Day. And or that when we would be talking on the phone and she would be like, hang on, I'm driving. And she would like make these like crazy turns because she couldn't stand to be the person waiting at the light. And she was so funny. But she kind of gave me the sense that that was to be the best, to be with the best, was a joyful thing for her. It wasn't like she didn't feel completely like her body didn't go in revolt in a similar way, like of this fight or flight situation when you basically what sports are is like they emulate this, adrenaline rush, oftentimes of like thinking about battle, right? Like that's this fight or flight thing that you're going for without that life or death situation. And she talked about how, she came to accept finally that race was her best race. She did her best, but then they had a relay maybe like a couple minutes after the medal ceremony for that sprint, and her coach had said like, you gotta finish hard, and she finished so hard she broke her finger. I mean, that is how intense she is. And that's not something that I understand, but I loved hearing her talk about it. I loved hearing her just be so fired up by imagining herself beating other people in the pool. But that's not something that motivates me.
That's a different kind of athlete. So tell us about Nihon Eiho.
Nihon Eiho is the Japanese swimming martial art, if you can imagine. And why wouldn't there be one, right? So like the samurai were protecting, in the feudal period of Japan, they were protecting different parts of Japan, the coasts, whether it's the sea or the lakes or rivers, and they developed these different strokes for doing that. And they had different schools of swimming, and those were the foundational strokes that were of this martial arts practice. And they ended up influencing a lot of what the Japanese national team ended up incorporating into their success in swimming competitively internationally in the Olympics, and with breaststroke, especially with that long glide and the patience, and you kind of teaching yourself that timing, and the egg beater kick being described in these old samurai scrolls, and being the foundation of synchronized swimming, like this, all of these things that they were able to do in water that we don't think about because it's competition of a different sense, like to be the most efficient, to be the most elegant, to be quietest, to be still, to be able to tread water and fire an arrow accurately, to do all of these things that are not like what we in sort of like the Western understanding of what swimming competition is. It's fastest, right? And it's an interesting way to think about what swimming success and the bestness of something, of an art can be. And so the martial art, the Japanese martial art of swimming in Nihon Eiho and all of these different techniques and strokes, it teaches like this kind of really wonderful whole person philosophy that I loved, and I thought was a wonderful way to kind of dovetail into flow, because it's about what are the lessons that you learned from it other than the physical lessons of swimming.
Speaking of which, if you have your book handy.
I do have it.
Is it the hardback? So the pages are the same?
I have the soft cover, the paperback, but I have the paragraph that starts in my mind, right?
Starting in my mind.
Uh-huh.
If you wouldn't mind reading that.
Sure. So this is the end of competition going into flow. In my mind, the salmon surfaces again, that elegant example of adaptation, tenacity, and stamina. We are not fish, but from them, we continue to take inspiration. In this case, the fish reminds us that swimming can be something to engage your whole self. From the rigor of swimming competition comes a devotion to swimming as holistic self-betterment. The emphasis moves from body alone to body and mind together. Think of a stream flowing into a river flowing into the sea. These waters run together in a way that helps me to understand why I swim.
I think that's a good capsule of the stuff I was mentioning earlier, just about the non-physical aspects of it. You devote a whole section on flow. Maybe you can just tell us what really you mean by that.
Sure. The flow section of the book is different from the first four sections in that there's no one character or big stories anchoring it in the same way that the other sections of the book are, because I think that it's more of this like philosophical, poetic, artistic, mythological, literary exploration, and also it's about like our understanding of what happens to our brains when we're in water, and that includes all the scientific stuff of like our, when we listen to water or around water, that our brain waves change and stimulate this alpha wave activity, which is associated with calm and relaxation and creativity, and that we seek to be around water and near water, and we know that to be true, like anecdotally, like always, right? That we build houses on the beach in spite of sea level rise, and we do polar bear plunges on the first of every year. It's like all of these things that we do because we know that they feel good. There's this interesting science that's emerging to tell us why that is, like that dopamine levels increase, metabolism goes up with cold water immersion especially, and that there are all these things that physiologically happen, right? And but in terms of like our minds, it's there's something really soothing and escapist of being in the water, and it's like has to do with sensory muffling of what you see and what you hear, and it's just like you're alone with yourself in a way that is really valuable these days.
Yes, another part I really like, not part, but the way you wrote the book with all this, flow-like things interlaced throughout the book. I kept thinking and contrasting in my mind the similarities and differences in other forms of exercise, because some of the benefits and wonderful features of swimming can be achieved with other things.
Mm-hmm.
When I get back from a ride, for example, I just have these, I make a joke with my wife. I say, if you ever really want to do something or ask me or buy something that I might say no to otherwise, just ask me after I get back from a bike ride, because I'm just high. But on the other hand, the whole thing about fluidity and buoyancy and all the other things that are unique to swimming, because you're immersed in this dense medium and especially if you're open water, is so different. I thought you did a really nice job of, pointing out the differences and all the benefits of swimming. I did a lot of self-reflection with this book, just about some of those spiritual and psychological aspects of exercise.
I'm so glad to hear that. I mean, I think that was what was I was really honored to. Okay, so in this past year, of course, this book coming out when no one could swim, a year ago, that that people had a chance to really think about their relationship with swimming and with water when they couldn't do it and when it was taken away from them, and like so many other things that, like, why is that, and when they want to bring it back into their lives, how do they want that to happen? And so the explosion in open water swimming in the last year has been about people challenging themselves to do a thing that they realize is so essential to their well-being and health, and not just physically, just feeling good, feeling happy, feeling like smoothed over, and coming out from a morning in the water feeling like more themselves, and that they have more resources to deal with all of life's many challenges. Yeah.
We're getting a little long, and before I go to audience question, I want to touch on one more thing. And I'll just throw out some words and phrases, and then we'll talk about Iraq. Jay Taylor, balance in the pool as in life, differences between peoples fall away in water, escape from war. You have a pretty significant section or several chapters on swimming at the compound in the green, is it called the green zone?
Green zone, yeah.
In the old Saddam Hussein palace. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of continue on this theme of resilience and finding escape and coping mechanisms, of course, it shouldn't be a surprise that even in a place like Iraq, that in a war zone, that there was a pool that ended up being a place that community was formed and escape was found and some semblance of normalcy. And I wanted to explore the question of why is it that some people learn to swim and others don't. And this story that I tell and was told to me is a really wonderful way of exploring that, which is like this like little mini UN of swimmers coming together in the period of 3 years in Iraq, in Baghdad, that why did that happen? And so that's what that story is about. And I really, I think it's a really special one.
Yes. And also I'll just mention for the audience there, you touch on race a little bit in your section on the history of community pools in this country, and they originally were about places to bathe and then gather, and then gradually with Jim Crow they became separated. So there's a whole section that you cover that, and that was nice. And I mean, I have other things I could ask about race, but I'm not going to. I've read some of your other pieces, and well, maybe I will.
Well, I want to leave time for audience questions too, if they can come up.
Well, here we go. What is your favorite swimming stroke?
Ooh. So always I was a breaststroker when I competed, but I love butterfly. Like I really love butterfly. It's so hard, but it feels like when it goes right, you feel like you're flying.
Yeah. I'm gonna pop this. Tell us about the significance of Lake George.
Oh, Lake George. Yeah. Well, so my husband grew up so his grandparents met and married there. So 2 sets of his grandparents met and married there. And then his mom and stepdad met and married there. And then we didn't meet there, but we did get married there. And we had ended up going there for summer visits after we started dating. And that is just such a special place to be. And we ended up swimming across the lake on our wedding day, and having about 40 of our closest friends and family do this like flotilla of sailing, rowing, swimming, kayaking, like across and back. It was really fun. And the fact that my husband's aunt and uncle were both National Outdoor Leadership School instructors was great because no one drowned. It was a really big logistical operation and we were just going to wing it. And they said, we don't trust you, so we're just going to sail and watch you. Make sure you're okay. Everyone has a buddy. No one died. It was good.
Good. It's like having that kayak with you while you're swimming in the open water.
Yeah.
What about the book, the children's book? Tell us.
Oh, okay. So Sarah and the Big Wave is about the big wave surfer Sarah Gerhardt, and she was the first woman to surf Mavericks back in 1999. And I wrote this cover story for California Sunday Magazine about women surfers preparing and training for the first Mavericks competition that was going to allow them to surf in it. And this was in 2018, fall of 2018. And it actually ended up not happening that year because of conditions, right? So if you know anything about Mavericks, it's like it only had, the conditions have to be just right for this wave to break. Anyway, but it was ahead of them being permitted to compete for the first time. And they were doing all kinds of crazy training, and I loved the story. And this children's book editor in New York saw the story and said, have you ever thought about writing a children's book? And I wrote a children's book about the day that Sarah meets her first big wave. And it was so fun to do. I always really wanted to do a kid's book, and it comes out next month. Yeah, which I can't believe it's here, but I'm really excited.
Did you do any of the illustrations?
No, I didn't do the illustrations. Sophie Diao is the illustrator for it, and it's amazing. It's beautiful. And I have this, there's a surprise in the middle that I cooked up that that she executed on, and I'm really excited about it.
Cool. Let's see, another question. For your long distance swimming, do you prefer lake, bay, ocean, or river?
Not river. I think because currents are so unpredictable and sort of, you never really know what is going to come up around the bend. I like lakes and ocean, I guess. I don't know. I like it all. I like it how it all has different moods. But open ocean swimming obviously is really the most challenging because of all of the things that can happen. But there are obviously places that you can pick and choose that are more reliable, more consistent than others, but temperature-wise, currents-wise, tides.
The thing that freaks me about it is the idea of coming up, for your breath, and a big wave goes down your throat.
Yeah, and that happens, and then you're.
I'm not really stoked about that.
Yeah, it's not for everyone. But you'll see, I mean, if you watch people who really love to do it, and the waves come up and they really work with the wave. I mean, they really charge up the wave before it breaks on them and go over. So it's a little bit of like a combination of like surfing and anticipating. And I find it very stressful myself. I love surfing. That's one thing. I love swimming. That's another thing. But I don't like what you're describing, which I just was watching of like big swell conditions, I think under the Golden Gate, and someone was swimming, and I just, it's not, I don't feel comfortable doing that, but I appreciate that other people love it and love conquering that for sure.
Yeah. Well, we're running long. I'm just going to encourage everyone to explore the book.
Sexy new cover right here.
Yeah, new cover, different coloring, and a safe trip home. And thank you so much for being here and describing the book for us. And I hope the sales of the new book go well. I know I'll be picking up a couple of copies for our grandkids. And thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. It was great to be with you. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank everybody for showing up. All right.